Hi everyone, it's James here. Yes, I'm back already. I know I said I was going to take a break from YouTube, but I've decided to sneak in one more video before I take my break. I was going to save this one till a bit later in the year, but I thought I'd just do it, get it done, get it out of the way. So I'm going to share with you my top 20 Doctor Who serials. This is the classic series only, not the modern remake, for reasons that I don't want to get into now. So let's just do it. I've been a big Doctor Who fan pretty much since I was about 5 years old, and wanted to share this great passion with you. So starting at number 20, we have the William Hartnell story, The Keys of Marinus. So William Hartnell was the first Doctor, and in this great six-parter he is accompanied by his granddaughter Susan and her two school teachers, Ian and Barbara, and they land on a planet which has got a beach. Sand is made out of glass and the sea is acid, and they have to go on this amazing adventure tracking down the 6 Keys of Marinus in order to save the world, basically. Each episode is set in a different location. It's just totally epic. It's, you know, cheaply made TV drama from the 1960s, so you have to kind of go with it, but I've always loved it. I used to love the book when I was a boy. So there we go. Number 20 is The Keys of Marinus. Number 19, we have the great Tom Baker serial, The Sunmakers, from 1977. This is the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker, in a brilliant adventure set on one of the moons of Pluto, where he arrives to discover that the whole place has been totally enslaved by this awful character called the Collector, who is just basically taxing everybody. So you're taxed on the air that you breathe, you're just taxed to death, basically. And it turns out that the Collector is this awful little kind of seaweed monster, and at the end he gets banished and he kind of swirls down inside his wheelchair. Great satire. It's written by Robert Holmes, who was one of the greatest Doctor Who writers. Brilliant script, just a really great story. That's The Sunmakers at number 19. Number 18, we have the totally cosmic Claws of Axos. This was a Jon Pertwee serial from his second season, and it tells the story of a race of beautiful aliens called Axons who trick everybody. It turns out they're actually these horrific monsters, and they're sucking the life out of planets, basically. It's got the Master in it, the Doctor's archenemy, played in inimitable villainous style by the great Roger Delgado. It's got Unit in it, which is the kind of crack team of soldiers that the Doctor becomes an advisor for while he's exiled to Earth in the 20th century. And it's just a great cosmic romp. Just everything that you think of as being classic 1970s Doctor Who, you find it in The Claws of Axos. It makes no sense whatsoever, of course. 1918. Okay, number 17, we have Warrior's Gate. This comes from the 18th season, the final season to feature Tom Baker. Very strange serial. It was written by Stephen Gallagher, who went on to become a best-selling sci-fi author. It's very strange, very abstract, set in this sort of weird nether universe called E-Space, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's very visually impressionistic. You have to kind of go with it. What I love about this story is that it's totally of its era. It's got a real sort of new romantic feel to it. You know, it came out in 1980. It's very mysterious, very enigmatic. It's about a race of time-travelling beings who've been enslaved, and it's all set in these weird multiple realities, and yeah, great stuff. Warrior's Gate. Okay, number 16, we have the classic serial Tomb of the Cybermen. This was Patrick Troughton now, the second Doctor. This was the TV serial which went missing for many years. It was presumed destroyed by the BBC because they used to wipe all the tapes back in the day, and then it turned up miraculously in a private collection somewhere, and we could all watch it for the first time. It wasn't quite as great and as legendary as we'd all been led to believe, but it's still pretty good. The Cybermen have been entombed in their tomb on the planet Telos, and the Doctor stumbles upon an archaeological expedition of very foolish people who were trying to enter into the tomb of the Cybermen in order to wake the Cybermen up, you know, as you do. And hugely atmospheric, just really kind of cold, chilly atmosphere. The Cybermen are at their best in this one. Just very, very sort of chilling and scary, really. At number 15, we've got the great Tom Baker serial The State of Decay, which comes from his final season. And it's all about vampires, set in on this weird medieval planet where there are 3 space pilots who've been stranded for countless millenniums, and they've turned into vampires basically, and they've enslaved everybody, and they live in the Dark Tower, which turns out to be the remnants of their spaceship. And there's a huge vampire living underneath the ground, and the Doctor has to impale it with a huge bolt of steel. So he gets a rocket, shoots it up into space, comes back down and pierces the vampire's heart and destroys them. And they all turn into skeletons at the end. Okay, number 14 is The Three Doctors, which was the 10th anniversary special. This was the story which teamed the first, second and third Doctors up for the first time in order to defeat Omega, who is a renegade Time Lord, who has basically been sucked into this antimatter world. He doesn't have a head anymore. He takes his mask off and there's nothing there. He's just been totally eaten away by antimatter. He kidnaps all the Doctors. They go to this weird kind of alien palace where he's living, and he tries to... Omega tries to escape and it doesn't work. And there's lots and lots of good fun in this one. Great chemistry between Jon Pertwee, who was the then resident Doctor, and his predecessor Patrick Troughton, who wind each other up all the way through the story, and there's just lots of great banter. It's a great unit story as well, featuring Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, who was a human unit officer who was sort of like the Doctor's sidekick really throughout the Jon Pertwee era. Just really great fun. Okay, at number 13, this is the first Doctor Who story I ever watched. This is The Planet of Evil. With Tom Baker and the beautiful, sadly departed Liz Sladen playing Sarah Jane Smith. Set on an antimatter planet, a strange dark jungle, one of the best jungle sets ever constructed for Doctor Who. They made it at Ealing Film Studios and it was all done on film. It just looks fantastic. Set on this alien planet where if you try and take anything away from the planet, you then can't escape from the planet. It sucks you back. And there's a strange antimatter monster lurking in this dark pool of antimatter, and there's a scientist who gets infected by antimatter, and he keeps turning into a kind of it's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story. He keeps turning into this awful monster on the spaceship and killing people, but he's got no memory of doing it after he comes back to normal. Very dark, very gothic, very scary. Okay, so coming in at number 12, we've got Inferno, which is a third Doctor story, Jon Pertwee's 4th serial altogether from his first season. This is fantastic. It's all about this drilling project. There's this mad scientist who's trying to drill into the Earth's crust. The Doctor tries to stop him, but he fails to stop him. Penetrates down and it starts to let all this awful green slime, this sort of primordial green slime. If you get touched by it, you turn into these horrific kind of hairy monsters. The Doctor gets transported to a parallel version of Earth, and the drilling goes completely out of control, and the Earth is completely destroyed by molten lava, and the Doctor then has to go back to his universe and try and persuade them to stop the drilling in his universe in order to prevent the Earth being destroyed again. And unfortunately everybody's being turned into these horrific hairy monsters, which makes things a bit difficult for him. But yeah, 7 episodes, it's too long, but it's very gritty. It comes from Pertwee's first season, which was largely done on film, on location, and the show became quite adult for a while, and that's a great example of that. Okay, number 11, from a bit later in the Jon Pertwee era, this is The Sea Devils, featuring Roger Delgado as the Master again. This was a sequel to the story The Silurians, which is also a great favourite of mine. Basically a race of sea mammals who have risen out of the depths of the ocean to reclaim the Earth, because it used to be theirs, and they went into hibernation. They've come back out of hibernation and they want the Earth back. They're aided and abetted by the Master, and anybody who was a young child in the 1970s will remember the scene where the Sea Devils come out of the sea for the first time. They've got these big kind of guns which will shoot you at distance, and yeah. Great location work in that story, lots and lots of action. Jon Pertwee was the action Doctor, so there's like speedboats in it and, you know, all manner of good fun stuff. So there we go, The Sea Devils at number 11. Okay, so coming into the top 10, we have The Invasion. So this was A Patrick Troughton story. He was the second Doctor, and one episode of this had to be recreated using animation because it had been wiped by the BBC. This is a Cyberman story. It's all about a mad scientist called Tobias Vaughan, who's got this kind of huge factory basically, but it's all a big front, and he's planning an invasion of the Cybermen. There's a very, very famous scene where the Cybermen attack London. So one comes out of the underground via a manhole, and there's a great famous scene of the Cybermen walking down the steps outside St Paul's Cathedral, and Tobias Vaughan is a fantastic villain played by an actor called Kevin Stoney. He's great, really great kind of gothic performance, an absolute megalomaniac. Patrick Troughton's great in it, really great chemistry between him and Fraser Hines, who plays his companion Jamie. Great stuff. First one from Peter Davison, who was the fifth Doctor. This is Snake Dance, which comes from his second season. Very strange story. It was a sequel to a previous story called Kinder, which is all about this strange alien parasite which dwells in the dark places of the inside. The Doctor's companion Tegan is taken over by this entity, and it basically takes the form of a snake. And if you're possessed, you get a kind of strange snake tattoo on your arm. The Mara controls Tegan, makes her go back to its home planet Menusa in order to try and actualise itself again and become an actual physical presence again, because it's been banished and it now exists as this kind of latent mental force. So it controls Tegan, and she takes it back to its own planet, and the Doctor realises that the way to defeat the Mara is to basically not believe in it, because the Mara is created out of people's fear and belief. It's a sort of a Buddhist parable. Great story, very clever. It was written by a guy called Christopher Bailey, who only wrote two stories. He wrote Kinder and then he wrote Snake Dance, both of which featured the Mara. And this was the first TV appearance by the British actor Martin Clunes, who went on to become a really, really popular actor. He's in all sorts of shows, and he is fantastic in it. He gets possessed by the Mara as well, and absolutely turns in a blistering performance. Coming in at number 8, we have the immortal The Green Death, which is anybody of a certain age will remember this story. It's the one with the maggots in it. It's set in a Welsh coal mining community. The miners go down into the coal face, discover these horrific green maggots, get infected, get covered in green slime, die, and then at some point down the line the maggots hatch out into a huge giant fly and start flying around the place. Again, really atmospheric. There's a mad scientist in it again. It's the last story to feature Jo Grant, played by Katie Manning, and there's a wonderful scene at the end where she takes her leave of the Doctor in order to run away with a young hippie guy, and it's so well acted. It's very moving. It's very touching, but lots of great action in that one. You can see the maggots there crawling around in the slag heap. Only in 1970s Doctor Who could you see such a sight. This is number 7, I think. Genesis of the Daleks, featuring Tom Baker. This got lots of complaints when it was first broadcast because it used a lot of Nazi imagery and Nazi ideas. The idea was he goes back in time to try and stop the Daleks being created. He encounters Davros, their mad creator, and it turns out that the Daleks were born in this situation where it's all to do with genetic engineering and trying to create the master race, and it becomes this very strong kind of anti-Nazi parable, really. Lots of World War I imagery, kind of trench warfare and gas masks, and just very, very strong stuff really for 1974, 1975. Got lots of complaints. There's a famous scene in it where the Doctor's given the opportunity to destroy the Daleks before they've even been created. They're all kind of incubating in these jars, and there's a scene where the Doctor has got 2 wires, and if he crosses the wires together it will destroy the Daleks, but he can't bring himself to do it because he considers that if he does that it makes him as bad as the Daleks, so he blows it. Okay, number 6 is Peter Davison's last story. This is The Caves of Androzani, which is set on a planet, or 2 planets rather, where there's a lot of drug dealing going on. There's a drug called Spectrox, which can extend your life if you take it, but it causes this thing called Spectrox toxemia, which can actually kill you, and the Doctor gets caught up in this drug running group, and it's a really complex story. It's full of politics, and there's a kind of twisted, malevolent guy called Sharaz Jek, who's been betrayed by somebody, and he's the main drug dealer, and he's living in this underground base, and he's just working to destroy this guy called Morgus, who's the guy who betrayed him. And it turns out he's got all these horrific kind of burns under his mask and everything. It's a very dark story. Peter Davison's last outing as the Doctor, he has to sacrifice himself because his companion Peri gets spectrotoxemia, and he has to go and rescue her, and he gets exposed to it, so he ends up having to regenerate. Great story, great way for Peter Davison to bow out. The Peter Davison era generally is quite weak compared to the first 4 Doctors, but he certainly went out in great style in that story. Okay, top 5, we have The Ark in Space, which is Tom Baker's second adventure. This is just a great piece of vintage TV. The Earth has been charred by some huge cosmic fire, and the remnants of humanity have been put into a space ark, and the space ark has been attacked by these awful kind of space woodlouse creatures called the Wirren, which are laying eggs inside the hibernating bodies and then hatching out. And the Doctor arrives, tries to work out what's going on. The main protagonist, called Noah's Ark, he gets infected and starts to turn into a Wirren. And there's a very famous scene where he's being taken over mentally by the Wirren, and he knows as a human his job is to try and guide the Ark to safety and to protect the humans, but he's got this new awful alien intelligence, which is the Wirren, taking over his brain, which is trying to make him work for the Wirren. It's really quite disturbing. His body's gradually being taken over, and he's physically transforming, but at the last moment his human side asserts itself, and he leads the Wirren to destruction. So yeah, great kind of heroic story, very dark, very gothic, very scary. Okay, number 4, this is often considered the greatest Doctor Who story of all time. I put it number 4. It's The City of Death by Douglas Adams, the famous TV comedy writer, really. Set in Paris, and it's about this awful character called Scaroth of Jagaroth, who has been splintered in the time vortex, and he's taken up residence in lots of different eras in Earth's past. And he's wearing a human disguise, so he looks the same in all the different periods of Earth. And he's plotting to try and find a way to bring his 12 different selves back together again. And it's a really complicated story. It involves him stealing the Mona Lisa in order to get loads of money to build a time machine. It's really mad, but it's full of sparkling dialogue from Douglas Adams, lots of great location work in Paris, and it's just known as a great classic, really, of Doctor Who. City of Death, wonderful stuff. Okay, number 3, we've got Pyramids of Mars, which is Tom Baker again from his second season. This is the one with the mummies. These are robots disguised as mummies. There's an Egyptian theme. It's all about Sutekh the Destroyer, who is this alien who's passed into Earth mythology as this god. He's imprisoned on Mars, and on Earth there's a kind of there's a house which has been taken over by these robots in bandages, and the owner of the house has been taken over by Sutekh and is planning to send a rocket up to destroy there's like a ray which is keeping Sutekh prisoner in his tomb, and they've placed a kind of force field around the house, or on the grounds of the house, so nobody can escape. And there's a really haunting scene where the poacher is being chased around the grounds of the house by these 2 mummies, who eventually catch him and crush him between their 2 bodies. Really scary and disturbing. There's also a great scene where one brother kills another brother because he's been taken over by this awful alien. Quite disturbing, quite heavy hitting for its time. Really good. Okay, number 2 is Spearhead from Space, which is Jon Pertwee's first story. It's all about this race of creatures called the Nestines, which can put their consciousness into plastic, and they make these creatures called autons, and they infiltrate Earth. And it's just really great scenes where shop window dolls start coming to life and attacking everybody. Hugely atmospheric again, lots of great acting. This guy here plays the main auton. He's actually so realistic that he looks like he's a human, but it turns out he is also a mannequin as well. There's a great chilling scene in a plastics factory where this young guy goes back to the factory where he's been working to try and find out what's going on, and it turns out that the factory is being used to manufacture these hideous plastic mannequins who come to life and chase him and kill him, basically. But the great scene at the end is where they all start to attack. All these shop window dummies start to come alive and break out of shops and killing people. Their hands drop away and they've got a gun inside their finger, Okay, and my personal favourites, number 1, this is The Seeds of Doom with Tom Baker from 1976. Really horrific story about some alien vegetable pods that have been shot down to Earth. They get buried in the snow in Antarctica. Dug up by an unfortunate scientific team in Antarctica. The pod hatches, infects one of the scientists. He turns into this awful creature called a crinoid, and the crinoid starts to attack and kill everybody else. There's a second pod which gets flown to England by a couple of mercenaries who are working for this absolutely just a complete maniac, this plant botanist, plant enthusiast, millionaire guy who lives in this big mansion. He's paid them to go and get the pod. He wants to nurture the pod. He causes it to attack one of his guys. He turns into a really horrific, massive version of the monster, which ends up sat on top of the house, crushing the house, and it ends up having to be destroyed by the RAF using bombs. But I mean, by then it's caused all sorts of awful carnage, and it's very hard hitting. It was directed by a guy called Douglas Camfield, who also directed The Invasion as well, the Cyberman one that I showed earlier, and he was a very hard hitting director, and he really knew what he was doing. So there we go, Seeds of Doom, number 1. There's loads I've missed out, but I thought I would just whiz through those. The videos come in at 23 minutes. I'll see if I can shave some off, but that's your lot for now. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you soon, or at some point. Take care. Bye-bye.